We hope you and yours are all well. In this difficult time, we can't get together much, and so we're really very pleased that we can bring you our lectures virtually. And particularly on a night like tonight, when we have all this snow and 10-degree weather, I'm glad not to have to go out anyway. This year, the focus of our talks has been on exploring conservation issues. We've had one on climate change, another on forest regeneration, a third about wildlife conservation, and tonight, Paul Cummings and Brit Basinger will talk about trails and public access. Next month, look forward to a talk on air and water quality. Both Paul and Brit are from the Chazen companies and have extensive experience in trail initiatives. So now I'd like to invite them to take it from here.
Great, thanks, Alice. Just before we get started in this, I just wanted to thank everybody for inviting us. It's our pleasure to make this presentation tonight. And Paul and I come at trails from similar but sometimes different angles. I'm a landscape architect and Paul is a planner. And together we plan and design and oversee construction of various trail types. We're currently working with RPA right now on a couple of interesting projects. And it's been my pleasure to work with several open space oriented or land trust focused organizations over my nearly 30 years practicing landscape architecture. And so currently we're working with groups like Scenic Hudson, Open Space Institute, the Otsego Land Trust, to name a few, and we're happy that we're able to work with you guys as well. With that, Paul has a lengthy background in planning, grant writing, and trail design, and he's one of our senior planners at Chazen, and I'm going to turn it over to him right now, and he's got a presentation that he's put together and is excited about sharing it with you.
Great. Well, thanks, Brit. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and hopefully this works. So bear with me. There we go. So is everyone seeing my screen there? It should just be a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, it's funny. I usually consider myself pretty tech savvy, but the last couple of times there's been I've had an issue where the screen sharing gets sort of messed up, and now now it's like I'm stage fright every time I start one of these things. So I present a lot, and you know, for those of you who do present, you still do get butterflies, and that's why I tell all the new people that come to work with us. But anyway, thank you so much for having Brit and I here tonight. We're really excited. Brit had reached out to me a couple of weeks back, and as Brit said, we worked together on a lot of different projects. And I said, Brit, you know, I've got these couple of projects I've been working on in the last couple of months that he and I haven't had a chance to interact as much. I said, I put these presentations together, and I think actually this might be an interesting thing to share with you all. And so Brit, he said, absolutely, let's modify it for your needs. And I'm hoping that it's going to be something a little different. We're certainly going to cover trail development, design, permitting, those sorts of things, but we're gonna talk about a different strategy for trail development that may interest you all as well at the same time. Brit, you know, there's a great shot of Brit. Like, you know, Brit is just an incredible landscape architect, and I'm just glad to be working with them. I've learned just a tremendous amount. Myself, as Brit mentioned, I'm a planner with Chazen. I've been really interested in trail planning for a number of years. It's one of the categories, if you will, that got me interested in planning, and I've had the good fortune to work on a lot of different projects. On a personal note, I'm a board member for the Lake George Land Conservancy. So I'm hoping when I was making this presentation, I tried to put myself in that perspective as well, talking to you all, and hopefully that resonates with you. We, in fact, are embarked on a strategy similar to what I'm presenting here tonight when it comes to trail development in a pilot project in the town of Bolton. And it's been very popular, and it's had a lot of positive feedback, and it's resulted in actual real projects. And so, I just think it's very interesting, and we're working on, we'll give you some other examples in a bit here, but again, I'm excited to share with you, and we'll just dive right in. So with respect to tonight, I want to, before we jump into trail and trail development and design, I want to talk about some overarching prevailing trends and themes that are related to trails. And so sort of prior to trails, and I think one of the reasons we're all here is conservation. We conserve lands for a number of different reasons. And then ultimately we want to provide access to those lands often. Sometimes we may not. And that access can vary depending on the history, cultural history of that property, the natural history of that property. And there's some instances you may not provide public access because of those natural resources. But they kind of go hand in hand. Developing of trails often relates to at least the trails we're going to be speaking to tonight. And I think a lot of the trails that you're familiar with or working on are very much sort of what I refer to as upland trail systems, not, shared highway, multi-use paved bike trails, although that's still relevant. But I want to talk a little bit about traditional trail planning from the conventional approach. And then I'm going to pivot and talk about the outdoor recreation economy. And my goal, following sort of this overview of these three items, is to kind of bring them all together and talk about this different perspective about trail development. And it really is about economically and culturally integrating trails into our regions and into our communities in a sort of unique way. And we've been referring to them as recreation hubs. I didn't coin the term. If you Google it, it's this idea, and I'll get more in detail that there's a symbiotic relationship and between economic development and conservation. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think mentally, a lot of people often think they are. And I think, by bridging the two together, we can bring more investors, if you will, pro trail and conservation individuals by taking this different approach to recreation trail development. And then, I'd like to give you some specific examples. So it's just not an esoteric conversation, and then some takeaways. So, backing up, let's talk about conservation for a minute. And I want to talk about conservation within the context of ecosystem services. We are, in some interesting or difficult, I should just jump right to it, financial times ahead of us. We in the land trust and municipal planning world, there was no consolidated funding application this year, so grants may be drying up. People don't necessarily have the disposable income to invest in land trusts or nonprofits and special projects. And so I think moving forward, the challenge is going to be arguing that conservation and trail development is vital to the economy, and that when we talk about conservation, there's an intrinsic value. We're all on this call because I think we get that. I'm preaching to the choir that there's an intrinsic value to conservation. But I think framing the conversation about conservation in terms of an economic value as well is going to be helpful and bring more people to the table to conservation and ultimately recreation trail development. And again, I'll get, this will come together here in a minute. But I mentioned I'm with Lake George Land Conservancy, and our mission there is protecting the lands that protect the lake. And we certainly have individuals that are involved there because of that intrinsic value, that beautiful upland. But we're starting to see more people engage because they're realizing that protecting that natural resource is vital to the local economy. And with respect to our mission, more disturbed upland development can have more runoff and then impact the lake. We've done some studies to show, hey, there isn't a lot of impervious surface in the watershed, but it's growing, and in select sub-watersheds in the lake, it's increasing. And scientists show that certain rates of impervious, sort of controlling for all their factors, you're going to see degraded water quality. And so, we've done some analyses, and I'm not going to bore you with all these details, but I just want to show you, we've done some analyses that showed all the past development in and around the watershed, and then future development at full build out. And what does that mean? Why am I talking about this right now when we're talking about recreation trails? Well, back to my point that conservation, it's not only, again, for this, I keep saying this intrinsic value, there's a monetary value as well. And so right now, Lake George just had its first harmful algal blooms. We've all been dreading it. And we've seen other communities where once this has happened, if it's to continue to happen, this can have a real impact on visitation, impact on businesses, impact on property values. And so the conversation as of late has dramatically changed, just even in the last few months here, about conservation and the value of it. So I want to put that aside for a minute, and we're going to come back to it. So I want to talk now about traditional planning and trails as amenities. And so, and maybe this idea of the ecosystem-based service will start resonating a little bit more when we talk about how we plan for trails now, or very much it's a conversation about quality of life, right? Often it's in a comprehensive plan, or it's organizations like, ours at the Lake George Land Conservancy, or organizations like yourselves, where, we conserve lands. It's the right thing to do. We have individuals that are interested in conserving lands, and that participate and don't donate and become members. And then, we sort of pitch them as quality of life amenities. Certainly there's an homage to them being economic asset, or having economic assets like property values, but it's not necessarily the first thing that we talk about. That said, planning for trails, regardless of your approach, is essential. And so I want to, this is something that we said we'd talk about. And so I want to talk about it a little bit. Planning for trails is much like planning for comprehensive plans, economic development, waterfront revitalization. It's very much the strategic planning process. You're going to engage potential user groups. You're going to engage local businesses, elected officials, and that input is going to be vital that's going to help guide you on what analysis you need to do. You're going to look at if there's interest in a particular area for trails or further conservation or type of trail. That's going to dictate what type of analysis you might do. What's the land use in that area? What are the demographics? What are the regulatory constraints? All that due diligence is essential to trail planning to make sure we're making wise investments. And then you take that research and that public input and you work through a visioning exercise, and ultimately that results in a plan, a document. And as a planner, I'm a firm believer in the power of community planning for many reasons I'll touch upon in a minute. But to say the least, it does things like it helps inventory and let you know what you have. And here we have a map from the town of Bolton that we worked on, showed all their different rec resources. But equally important, in addition to showing off what they had, it showed, if you look on the left, where are their gaps? Where are we missing the easy stuff? Where can we provide one amenity in one site and co-locate it to another site that's missing? So this starts helping us ask more questions. This isn't supposed to be the answers, but helps us ask intelligent questions by doing the really good inventory and analysis. And mind you, this is built off public input as well. Everything's not online. There's not enough time in the day to visit every single site. You need to engage the community and the stakeholders to find out where these resources are and what's important to them. And then ultimately it translates to figures like this. This is that same project. We're looking at where is there these hot pink areas on the figure to the left. Where can we promote further conservation? And once the conservation's there, where can trail connections occur? And then to make sure we're not looking at things in the rearview mirror and saying, geez, I wish we had thought about them differently. We add a little more meat to the bone to say, okay, where should the trail alignment be? Where would trailheads be? How do we avoid neighbor conflicts? It's interesting, during COVID, the amount of people on using recreation trails has just been incredible. But who knew that, say, for example, this image on the right is a pinnacle in the town of Bolton that was conserved just a couple of years ago. And everyone thought, oh, geez, the local people really like to hike this. Well, they had 14,000 people hiking it this year. They ended up having to close it. It was so popular, blocking the roads, the neighbors, it was an issue. And so these unintended consequences in the absence of planning, where this image on the right is trying to fix some of those issues and expand further conservation. And then trying to tell a coordinated story, just from a logistics standpoint, letting people know how to get around. So with comprehensive wayfinding signage. And then it helps market your community and brand your nonprofit. This imagery can translate to online content as well. So there's continuity. So this is good, solid trail planning is what I'm trying to illustrate. These are the pieces of good quality planning. It's stakeholder input, it's data gathering, it's visioning, it's problem solving, consensus building, and then to add intelligence to it, what we use our planning efforts is to ultimately translate to cost estimates and likely permits, and we can use those to revisit some of our ideas to say, my gosh, we thought this was a great trail routing, but it needs 10 different permits and it's going to cost double the amount we thought, even at a conceptual level. But good planning should include this. It is the 30,000 foot level estimate, but this is very helpful for pursuing grants. I mentioned consolidated funding application, capital management for you as a nonprofit, fundraising, capital initiatives. But then also it helps identify the permitting. And so, I always get a kick out when I start working with some organizations, where, the people think, well, we've got volunteers and we got shovels, and, Jim so-and-so said we can cross his land. And, we're right there about to build this thing. And you start doing a project and everyone says, well, how much for the design? How much for the permit? And they don't realize that, ultimately, hey, did you know that little simple route, if you had done that, you could have gotten in a lot of trouble because you didn't do seeker, you didn't do wetland delineation, you didn't realize that they're endangered species that you needed consultation. There's archaeosensitive areas, and you got to consult with SHPO, the state's historic office. Stormwater management, because you're ultimately disturbing more than an acre. Oh, by the way, that curb cut you put in for the parking area needs a highway work permit. Yes, that new kiosk image I just showed doesn't need a local building permit. You need easements from Jim, because Jim's not always going to be the property owner. And then also, who's going to maintain this? If you have multi-agencies crossing all these lands, you're going to need MOUs, memorandum of understanding. So, these are the pieces that really make trails complicated and can take a long time to build. And then if it's a really robust trail, it's a lot of design. Sometimes it can be simpler, and sometimes it can be more complex, and sometimes it can require construction management or not. And procurement, can be difficult, even, this day and age right now during COVID, that's certainly been an issue. So, before I launch into sort of this different approach or different way to frame trail development, the benefit to this approach is conventional planning is wonderful. It's consensus building, it's brainstorming. It identifies trails as a quality of life initiative, which does have value, that brings investors and stakeholders to the table. And it has a diverse user groups that could become involved. And that's wonderful. That's what community planning is all about. The limitations, however, are a few, and I don't think they're fatal, but they're worth the planner admitting that sometimes if you bring a lot of people to the table, you need to ultimately arrive at consensus, and it can dilute your mission. It can complicate the mission. You may have thought, hey, we were really going to try and develop a trail system that was for one particular aspect of a user group. And next thing you know, you're designing trails for all users and all user types, and it's leading to conflicts. And then I argue, intrinsic value of conservation, and then the value of your house being next to and then the goal of just having outdoor access for quality of life doesn't bring everyone to the table. It may not bring some elected officials to the table. It may not bring business community to the table. And so there's some limitations from this quality of life perspective. And so this is where I want to pivot to really sort of where we're going with all this. We want to talk about the outdoor recreation economy, that there's an untapped way of communicating conservation and trails, and bringing people to use trails that are just there to use a trail, but now you have a captive audience to tell them what your mission is and how important the conservation was before this to lead up to this trail. And if you can get the business community involved, they can become engaged in that process. And so we talk about this symbiotic relationship as the outdoor recreation economy, and it's massive. This is from 2017, and I'd be curious to see what the update would look like from the Outdoor Industry Association. But the outdoor economy is massive. Now, granted, these figures include things like boating and some big outdoor uses. So, but ultimately, people are spending a lot of money to enjoy the outdoors. From an employment standpoint, it's one of our largest sectors of employment. This is something that I don't think we're talking about all that often. For New York, again, these are older figures. It's 41.8 billion in consumer spending in outdoor recreation, 313,000 direct jobs, local tax revenue, wages. So, this is wonderful. We're all part of a wonderful mission for conservation and trying to provide trails for people. But, I encourage us to maybe start thinking about, in addition to providing this quality of life and conserving land, for the sake of doing it, it's also an essential part of the economy, I'd argue. Who's spending on trails and outdoor recreation? I don't think there's always I think with COVID and the issues we faced this year in 2020, we want to expand and have greater equity in outdoor recreation. But the reality is, it tends to be people of higher income and higher education that have disposable money and want to partake in causes like yours and the Land Conservancy and other nonprofit efforts. And they're spending money at local businesses. And a lot of times you survey these local businesses and they don't even know. They don't know that family's staying at the lodge because they wanted to do X adventure and they're eating there. So the businesses haven't necessarily made that connection, but they're spending the money nonetheless. And just some anecdotal figures, I won't read all of these, but we know that per trip spending for people going mountain biking, are hundreds of dollars just on a teeny little mountain biking trip. The sales of backcountry skis alone, we were just talking about the snowstorm, 50 million in just back. Then that's a very specific type of ski gear, mind you, 50 million. A Vermont study showed, in a year, 410,000 people accessing the trail system and generating $30.8 million. Anecdotally in areas around the Adirondacks and our neck of the woods, the little town of Newcomb has 450 year-round residents. Well, they have 100,000 people signing in at trail registers, or I'm sorry, 50,000 signing at trail registers. And we know from studies that about 50% of people on average sign in. So there's approximately 100,000 people going there. I mentioned the Pinnacle this is an old figure, 7,000. We have 14,000. The little mountain biking trail in Queensbury that was really well designed, and we'll get into design here, but a purpose-built trail is now second and first. It fluctuates as the most popular mountain biking destination in New York on singletrack.com. So again, these missions of creating trails and recreation have economic impacts, significant economic impacts. So when we talk about trail development, and this idea of economically and culturally integrated trails or recreation hubs, it's worth explaining that a little bit more. I used the word earlier, symbiotic relationship, and you all know these places. You live in an area right now. You're experiencing it yourself, but there are other areas where it really sticks out. There are places we vacation, our friends have moved to, our kids have moved to. You look at it's this nexus between the business community, the outdoor recreation, and the conservation-based community, supporting local restaurants, supporting nonprofits. It's this integrated approach. Some communities, many of these I've had the good fortune to go myself. Maybe some of you have done the same. I suspect so. But places kind of, more locally, Lake Placid, Woodstock, Vermont, Bar Harbor, Boone, North Carolina, further out west, Jackson, Bend, Oregon. These are places where where conservation, outdoor recreation, and economic development are synonymous. They're one in one, and everyone's rowing in the same direction when it comes to that. And you don't need to be a Jackson, Wyoming to get there, or at least use a strategy a little bit to move the ball forward in your own community. Is really sort of my point here. Speaking of what it looks like on the ground, it means that your government and nonprofits are doing strategic planning and looking at conservation, the alignment of conservation and recreation. I won't read through all these, but there's there's an effort for funding related to that. We are assisting one another for permits and approvals. You're coordinating and assisting one another on operation and maintenance of trails. You're advocating and developing partnerships that are not just conventional partnerships. They may be large hotels that are bringing in lodging that want to recreate on the trails, and they're participating in funding conservation efforts. And then you're marketing and branding as such. On the business side, they're doing the same thing. They're promoting, supporting, and participating in those same recreation and conservation efforts. Their business strategies align. Their marketing strategies align. They become members of the organization. Businesses that you may not have otherwise had participating may one day participate, and then they have technical and material assistance that they could provide. That again just strengthens your organization. And then their marketing and branding. And you think of those examples I showed earlier of those communities. The local hotels, restaurants are all marketing and branding and selling and giving promotions for lands that are, you know, nonprofit or federally or state-owned conservation lands with trails on them. And so when we talk about trails from this perspective, I think it's really important to focus on purpose-built trails. Trails, it's wonderful to have trails for all user groups, but if we want to make sustainable trails that meet and balance the environment that we're going to be traversing, you may not put the 10-foot wide multi-use crushed stone path through a certain preserve that you worked on or conservation. It may not be the appropriate use, but a cross-country ski single track trail might be, or an orienteering type trail might be. But these are purpose-built trails. I'll talk to them in a little bit, but they're professionally designed. They're focused on high quality and authentic experiences, and they're sustainable, and you know they really have dedicated maintenance and management for those uses. And so instead of having many trails that cover everybody, you have lots of different types of trails in your areas if you're going to have them, and sometimes they can overlap. And so you think mountain biking, hiking, backcountry skiing, in addition to our, you know, nice, pleasant walking trails, blueway trails, equestrian trails, and maybe snowmobile trails, but they're purpose-built, well-designed facilities. And this stuff isn't made up. This isn't you or I going out with shovels. Frankly, Brit and I, we're not, this isn't a sales pitch. Some of these trails Brit and I aren't designing. We work with a gentleman, Steve Ovitt, who has a company, and he's a mountain bike enthusiast. Some of these really rigorous trails, they have design standards that are recognized nationally or by state or federal agencies, and they are the basis of design, much like a federal highway design manual we might use for roads or more multi-use trails. Brit and I are really good at big picture planning. Brit and I are good at many other types of trails. We're great at the access and amenities and all those other facilities. But sometimes when you get to these really like very specific single track or purpose built active recreation trails, you know, you got to bring in somebody to collaborate with. So just some examples of what this looks like, because right now it may be a little hard to think about. I mentioned Johnsburg. I mentioned Steve Ovitt, who lives in Johnsburg, and we collaborate with him. Gore has ski mountain bike riding. And the idea is all these locals have been backcountry skiing all over the place, and people have been informally mountain biking. And they said, hey, look, you know, this should be opened up, and we should make trail networks go right to downtown North Creek. It should connect to different lodging, and this should be a year-round destination, not just winter. And so they really focus on purpose-built trails, integrated trail design, collaborating with stakeholders, and it evolved into a map like this. This is just the winter trail use. This trail system piggybacks or is used in the summer for mountain biking trail, for example, and hiking and orienteering and camping. And what you're seeing here in this image is Gore Mountain, the ski area in the middle. And the idea is, you know, collaborating with New York State, the Adirondack Park Agency, the private sector. There's a mining operation there that they're collaborating with for recreational amenities. There's a private development that's putting in exclusive high-end condos. And so they really are thoughtful about integrating this trail experience. But it's not the same trail for every user. It's very different types of trails that are designed for the landscape and the various user groups. And what it's done is it's brought the business community together, and a lot of people are really interested in doing this that I argue would not otherwise have been involved with. And they're working. They have a little local trail non-for-profit that's growing, and it's growing in part because of this vision. I mentioned Bolton. I showed you maps earlier, so I won't get too into it. But they dubbed it the Lake George Land Conservancy, working with the town. They dubbed it a recreation hub. They're promoting and marketing to millennials for outdoor events. They're collaborating with the local beer brewery. The brewery has brewed a beer called the Pinnacle Brew or beer. Some of the proceeds of that beer are going to the Land Conservancy and trail development. You know, collaborating with the Sagamore. I showed you these figures earlier. But basically the vision, you know, is very detailed, and it's bringing on, you know, Bolton always rested on the fact that it had the Land Conservancy making trails and that the Adirondack Park Agency had trails. but they just weren't necessarily, the most sustainable trails, and they weren't thoughtful. They weren't user specific, and they weren't integrated or connected. And now with this vision, they've attracted a lot of American Land Trust Alliance funding, CFAs, and then new donor support. But they're also marketing it, and they're collaborating with the town, local businesses, the Chamber of Commerce. And these are just some examples of other areas that are marketing around their outdoor recreational experience. STOWE, Vermont's a great example. Their mountain biking complex is world renowned, and the businesses are all clamoring to open trailheads in their back parking lot. So people will go shopping, either eat or literally just shop for retail, and then can jump on the trail. So they're trying to make their, if you go their cross-country ski network, you can pop into retail, you can shop, you can grab a beer and be back out in the trail or ride a bike. I mean, every business and the business community and the conservation-based community and the outdoor recreation community rather are all rowing in the same direction. And it is a symbiotic, synergistic effect. And here's their trail system that they've developed. And it's a remarkable, if you talk to anyone, how much of this has been developed just in the last few years. But a priority, the backbone of this is the conservation. It's leading to, geez, we'd love to connect this area. Let's see if we can, is it part of our mission? Does it tie into conservation? Does it have our conservation values that are important to us? You don't want to sell yourself just on trails, but trails can help lead to further conservation. You have a captive audience that wants to invest. Maybe they came there for recreation, but now they understand the value of the conservation. Little Old Newcomb is marketing themselves like this as well. Raise Them Right campaign to bring the kids up to live there. Telemarket or telecommuting. 450 year-round residents. They've actually seen a number of lodging and businesses open up over the last few years from their marketing campaign and recreation efforts. They're very lucky is that they have very robust Adirondack or state-owned trail systems as well. So some key takeaways is, again, the economic value of open space is significant, and tying together conservation and outdoor recreation and selling that is important. I'm not asking you to deviate from your mission. That, hey, it's certainly conservation for conservation's sake is vital and essential, but there are opportunities to talk about it differently to get other funding sources and others involved. It takes very thoughtful planning and long-term visioning and implementation. They are purpose-built trails. It's not you and I going out with a shovel and digging them up. That's often not a sustainable trail, even if it wasn't necessarily a purpose-built trail. You need to work with the user community on that. You want to foster partnership and capacity building. One of the things we're talking about the Land Conservancy is our own success with all the trails is that, who do we want to be a trail organization and maintenance organization in perpetuity? Are there partners we can collaborate with, stewardship programs? You're going to think long-term and that rolls into the long-term operation and maintenance. And then we do think, I say savvy marketing, that doesn't have to be business and financial driven, but certainly can be part of your integrated into your mission, or you can be working with local businesses to integrate it into their mission and marketing strategy. And again, we've seen success, and we're seeing more communities plan for trails and conservation this way. And so when Brit and I talked earlier, we thought that this was a very interesting way to frame the conversation to promote more access in the woods and promote conservation. It's a little different than maybe what some organizations are doing today. And so with that, I believe you had mentioned you were going to ask questions in the chat box, but I do not see that on my screen. Yeah, if anyone could help me out, if there are questions.
Hello, is Alice? Are you there? Do you have access to the chat questions that you might read to us?
Hi, Brit and Paul. I am here, and I see. First of all, you can find the chat by just putting your mouse down. I think, Paul, you probably have to go up towards the top of your screen.
Oh, yep. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. I see it now. Yep.
Yeah, there are a few questions coming in, and maybe before you start taking them, and since I'm here already talking, I will say, that at RPA, we did a trail vision plan a few years back. We had a number of community meetings and stakeholder meetings and put together the trail vision plan. And then we did a second phase and did a trail action plan on that. So we had a committee. Right now, we're waiting a little bit because there's almost 10,000 acres that are, well, no, sorry, I'm not counting the land that we're selling to DEC soon. Call it 11,000 acres that will be owned by the state of New York within the next year or two. And some of the core trails, what we envisioned the trail, north-south trail on the plateau and then connecting trails. But the north-south cord trail would be the first one we build. And it's going to depend on a lot of those state lands. So once New York State owns it and we can start talking with them and they're doing their unit management plans, then we'll start talking to the other landowners to make the other connections. But that's all kind of in the works and just on pause right now for a little bit, waiting for some land to change hands. So I just wanted to get that in since that's what you were talking about. And go ahead.
Yeah, and Jim, that's a great point. You know, I'm you know, Brit had shared that with me, and so I think you know, my piece about the sort of the traditional trail planning is essential. That was really one of my points earlier, is that, you know, that's obviously helping you coordinate. You know, I shouldn't say I'm assuming that's helping you coordinate with the state. It's assuming it's helping you coordinate where those future connections may be, and that's so you know, it's really important. You know, I think the piece that we're trying, that I guess one of the things I'm speaking to here is that, you know, it's sort of the moving forward. How do you implement? How do you get more people engaged or involved and invested in those efforts? You know, we work with the DEC all the time on unit management plans, and, you know, trying to say, hey, you know, this trail system's in there already, or there's already a plan for it. Can you integrate it into your unit management plan? You know, for having more stakeholders, having more, you know, frankly, decision makers, leadership, business community on board with that, and helping to, you know, I don't want to say pressure, but work with the DEC. We found that, you know, the Johnsburg example is probably the best point there. You know, they're really pushing the limit in a couple of small spots where some of those trails are being proposed on you know, forest preserve lands. And it's because of that collaboration and that vision, I think it's helping that project to move forward. It'll take a while, but I'm hopeful. I do want to say, I see the Valentinos, who my dear friend Matt Valentino, growing up, that's their parents, and I have not seen them forever. So sorry. I was wondering if I'd see them tonight. Hello.
Yeah, Jim, you bring up a good point. Paul and I worked on a project for Winnicke Land Trust for Northern Dutchess County. And that process was, you know, an internal process to identify all the existing trails, the proposed trails, and connections that were needed. And so throughout that process, we developed a pretty comprehensive trail plan that enabled Winnicke to start searching out, you know, partnerships, landowner agreements, memorandums of understanding, grants, permits, and so on. And so that planning effort right there, we looked at probably over 50 trails and whittled it down to 20 priority projects. And they are working with landowners, state agencies, county level folks, and trying to get each of those trail connections moving in the right direction. So,
yeah, that's awesome. So we'll talk more, Brett.
Okay.
So I do want to not go too far without having people ask the questions that have come in. So Kara asks, are there specific projects that you're working on with RPA on? And if so, what are they?
Brit, you know that one.
Well, Jim, you probably be better. I think it's appropriate for you to say.
All right. So yes, currently Chazen's working on the trail design for the what will be the main trail at Barberville Falls. And they were able to do part of that design early on last summer, and the volunteer trail crew built the temporary trail that many of you have been using to go down to the falls. Follows the bottom half of that route, and it connects in kind of a shorter way and more steep. And the trail that Chasen's designing, they had Steve Ovid in. It's going to make the beginning part of the rim trail nicer, and then it'll design a professionally built trail that comes off of the ridge. I said the rim trail, the ridge trail, further down and cuts back in, and will make access to the bottom of the falls available to more people. It won't be as difficult to get down there. A little bit longer walk. So that's one thing. And then we have had them working with us and the Rensselaer Land Trust on the Posakill Bends project down in Troy, where we're still trying to get a really good public access and trails started in there. So next question is, or Paul, did you want?
Yeah, I see the one. David, thank you for the kind remarks. And Judy, I think the next question was, how would you suggest trails can be more welcoming to people who haven't been using them? It's a great question. And I think one of the great images that we showed there, or I showed, was the wayfinding sign. Well, let me back up. People, it's funny. This is the business approach to it all, right? To some respect, is that, people, we often think about, oh, it'd be great to get that metal sign on the highway, and that would turn more people to meet us. But we know from travelers and destination studies, and people obviously are using the internet more, and search optimization, and are finding things by websites, and they're not being driven to areas by sort of a political boundary, their geographies and experience. And so one of the ways we can be more welcoming is making sure that our online content, our print media, and I know you all are involved in this, is informative, it's accessible, it's easy to understand. I know, I'm an advocate for helping to rate trails so people know what they're about to embark on in the first place. Think of it like skiing, Black Diamond versus Blue Square, how many miles, recommended age groups. I've seen trail systems that have really, really wonderful information. As a father of two little boys, it's really much appreciated when you come across that. So that's one way. So it's about how are people arriving at finding out about our trails? What are our maps? What's the information we're providing them? And once we get there, we talk about the hierarchy of wayfinding signage. So that image I showed of those signs, there's a hierarchy. There are the road signs. It's easy to navigate. People, we take for granted living in and enjoying the areas we do, saying, oh, you turn left at Jim's house, and the old post office is on the right, and you hang it right there. That's how it is growing up in Bolton. Well, if you're new to the area and you want to enjoy the hiking trail, that can be very intimidating to go drive all the back roads and try and figure out where these things are. So, and then once you get there, the information kiosk. So I think signage, having this sort of uniform experience from your online content to signage. And then, it's really important to have your amenities. And when I say amenities, parking, it includes signage. Maybe it is outhouses. To what extent, I know that can be a heated debate in trail and public access, but it is about having, an as rich of an amenity experience as possible for someone pulling there. We're really, and Brit, I'll just add this: we've been really focused on trailheads, and so quality informative parking, quality signage, maps, those sorts of things have been really helpful, people to navigate to and then understand what they're about to embark on.
Yeah, there's almost like two sides of the same coin, which is some trails you want to keep a secret. You know, I think Paul's example of the Pinnacle is one of those projects. And then, you know, we were recently involved with the Mount Beacon Trail, and that just exploded. And Scenic Hudson was trying to figure out how they could deal with overuse and an unwelcoming situation. So we worked with them to create, you know, a welcome and well-organized parking lot. Same with Open Space Institute up in Tahaz. So what we're finding out is that trails are becoming more desirable, and the facilities that are upon arrival don't match the user's expectations. And so I think what we've seen lately, especially over the last half a dozen years, is that all the trails are being worked on to provide more sustainability, that they're not eroding, and that there are better orientation throughout the trail. But a lot of times, you know, organizations are really focusing on their trailhead experience.
I see. Were we involved in the the North Creek Railway project? You know, it's interesting.
Yes.
Yes, well, it depends. So there's a lot of iterations to it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, there's the train line that runs from is it Corinth, Brit, to North Creek?
Yeah, so let me jump in there.
Yeah.
One of the first studies that was done by Warren County was the first Wilderness Heritage Corridor, and that involved I think it was seven. It was an intermunicipal agreement between seven towns, and that study pretty much, and that was back in 99 or 2000, and was part of a different chapter in my life, but we were involved with that in designing trails, but mainly the community component of that, and making sure that the community had access to the trailheads, and really making, you know, aesthetic treatment throughout each of the communities to connect to their waterfronts, as well as providing parkland amenities for people to gather before and after they hit the trails.
Yeah, and the piece, if you're not familiar with it, it's a historic rail line from Corinth to North Creek.
Yeah.
And the idea was that they were going to, and that they did, bring a historic trail back, and then each town had a theme along the stop for people to stop at. So you get to Hadley Luzerne, there's whitewater rafting, for example. And the themes went beyond even the railroad. That, just as Britt mentioned, it was really forward thinking when you worked on that, Britt. This first wilderness experience is that it's beyond that, because the rail adjoins the Hudson River, and so there are the indigenous peoples that use the river to navigate, the lumber industry. So it's the train line was the modern iteration of being able to navigate up and down it, but it really was looking at the communities at large and their resources. And so since that time, Warren County is sort of the point. Warren County Planning is the point people on that. And Wayne Lamoth in particular. And we've worked on many different pieces in communities along there that are under the First Wilderness, you know, moniker, whether it be additional park access, canoe, blueway trails. My pause was that there's a great debate about whether to rip up that rail line. They've had issues with the rail companies themselves. And, you know, we've seen elsewhere in the Adirondack Park and in the country where they're, you know, to talk of ripping up the trail line and making a multi-purpose trail. So I volunteered to help have that conversation about what should be done. It's still being talked about at the county, if they should continue to provide rail service.
That's been a 25-year endeavor.
Right.
And so each of the communities kind of take their own piece of the plan and try to advance independent initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Hope we answered your question.
Great.
It was amazing. Thanks. It was one of those great projects.
It says required there. Someone had, that same person asked it regarding the RPA 11K acres. Where are they? We did the train. When New York State pulled the right back, we did the bike tour. So I follow in that same question. They were just asking where that 11K acres was located.
Yeah. So can everybody see my map?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see. I'm gonna see if I can do this. So what you're seeing here on the map, this kind of outline that goes up around here, that's the ecological boundary of the Rensselaer Plateau. So now you're looking at you're essentially seeing Rensselaer County here. You can see 787 over here on the left hand side and the Hudson River. So towns of Stephentown and Nassau. The dark green properties here are the lands that are currently conserved, owned by RPA. This actually may be an old map because there's Barberville Falls Preserve that we now own right over here. But Albert Family Community Forest is here. Chestnut Hills right in this area. This is our Lieutenant Colonel Dundrum property that we'll be selling to the state. This is our Post Hill Community Forest. This is the Grafton Forest. So the light green are currently conserved lands, the Tibbet State Forest, Pittstown State Forest, Grafton Lake State Park, Dyke and Pond Environmental Education Center, and this is Cherry Plain in the Capital District Wildlife Management Area. So this brown here is, all these browns are 9,700 acres. And this part here, this is the former Coe lands. This will become a wildlife management area. It'll be connected to this area. So this is a Fire Tower Hill off of north of Route 43 in Stephentown. This is the Atwater Tract, just south of. It's kind of between Route 43 and Garfield Road, and you can see Chestnut Hill like sticks right into that land. And then up here, this is a 4,500 acre parcel that will become state forest, and a couple smaller parcels that will be state forest here. And you can see they actually connect to the Post Hill Community Forest. And you'll see a gap right over here between the wildlife management area and this land. And we actually just recently have a contract on the piece of land that fills that gap there. So that's 9,700, and then here's 1,200 acres up here that we own, the Grafton Forest, that we'll be selling to the state. That will connect to expand the Pittstown State Forest essentially. So the core trail kind of envisions starting down here and kind of going up through like this.
That's amazing.
Maybe like that. So this is the biggest area between Dyke and Pond and Grafton Lakes, is kind of the biggest gap that we might look at. It really depends on what landowners would be interested in. So
Jim,
there's your 11,000 acres. So stand by in the next, year or two. It's really getting through all the due diligence and bureaucracy of the state.
Jim, will you have an agreement or work out a volunteer stewardship program with the state where you'll be help maintain trails and trailheads and those things?
We already sat down with Region 4 to talk about that. So
okay, yeah.
We'll be right there at the unit management plan, unit management plan meetings, and inviting our constituents in, the people who want to be involved. And
excellent.
There's a conversation about like us being involved in the trails. And of course, the Rensselaer Land Trust and RPA have this amazing volunteer trail crew that they do such a great job, and they'll be involved in helping to build some of the trails through there too.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I should have mentioned that the exception with some of this are when you have these really solid volunteer trail crews. The North Creek one is an example of that. While Steve Ovitt, who lives there, has helped, identify corridors, as he likes to put it. You've worked with Steve. He'll walk it with GPS, and he's kind of his background. He's 30 years DEC forest ranger, but he's also a mountain biking backcountry enthusiast. So he has that whole perspective. But it is a volunteer trail development effort in North Creek, and they're amazing. They're amazing trails. So that kudos to you all, that if having that as an asset.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what questions, I'm just, sorry, Paul, I'm distracted by the questions coming in. So, yeah, Dickinson Hill Fire Tower, I'm not, where that question is, I'm not sure if you're talking about the land that we own up by the Pittsdown State Forest is near the Dickinson Hill Fire Tower. And that's really a Grappling Lake State Parks kind of project. Although one of our board members, Dick Gibbs, was the really the guy who made that Dickinson Hill Fire Tower project work. If you want to clarify that question, maybe I'll try to answer it better. So RPA obtained the property that we're selling to the state. We just purchased it originally from the Gundrums. It was 900 some odd acres, but then we added 3 other properties onto that with adjoining property owners that we talked to, and they were interested in selling. So we got it up to 1,200 acres. The 9,700 acres is part of a 23,000 acre project, which was done by the Conservation Fund, purchasing the former Coe lands. And those 23,000 acres are in Vermont, Washington County, along the Taconic Crest, and then 9,700 on the plateau. And RPA, our role in that was, I made the phone call back in 2008 to get the ball rolling on that. And we were kind of the boots on the ground and communicating with the towns about the project, and kind of strategizing with the Conservation Fund and DEC on the rollout of that. But we don't actually own that land. It's the Conservation Fund that owns it, and we'll be selling it to New York State. And yeah, Kara asks, is all that going to become designated forest? And yes, it's either wildlife management area or it's state forest. And at any rate, it's all conserved in perpetuity by the state going forward. Yeah. I'm fielding a lot of these questions. I wasn't even sure I was going to say anything tonight.
Yeah.
No, that's great. We have the same experience on, these lectures have an opportunity to talk about your mission and then obviously what we're talking about. So it's great. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? We've seen it all, so we're happy to talk.
It was really nice to hear the question about First Wilderness. That brings back great memories. And as Paul said, the Johnsburg project is an outflow of that 25-year process. Mm-hmm. So.
And the Bolton project's been really unique in that, the land is, it's not without controversy, mind you. It's a different, it is a pilot project, and there's, as a land conservancy organization or land trust organization, it is a different approach, and it's resonated well in that town, but it may not resonate well for every project. But when I look at the Rensselaer Plateau, and it's I obviously upstate New York is sort of organized similarly all over, right? These sort of smaller settlements and hamlets, and so I see Steventown and think to myself, that could be a North Creek, and the trail network from downtown to the uplands, and I'm spitballing. I'm not quite literally saying that, but and some of that trail network may not be part of your mission or organization. It could be the towns, and that's part. But ultimately, the goal is to get those trails integrated into the uplands that you're all involved in conserving. So and that's really actually a good example. The North Creek, Johnsburg, all those that I was referencing earlier. Those last miles, where you may be really mostly focused on the conservation, you are providing really bucolic hiking trail setting, but the user that wants to get from point A to point B from downtown to experience those, that may not be yours, but you may collaborate with others to get there. And those trails might be more user and focus or active focus, a particular activity. And
Yeah. What we haven't touched on at all is the Empire State Trail or the Champlain Trail, and so those two core lines, everybody's trying to tap into those and also build out from the great marketing that's happening with them.
Absolutely. Great.
So John asks, do you have any suggestions on how to get young people more involved with planning and leadership in trail efforts, and any suggestions for marketing to our youth in schools? And it's funny, if someone else had asked that question, I would have said, oh, you ought to talk to John Slyer about that. So John said that to me privately. Sorry, John.
Yeah.
Like that was private until I just said that. But
well, it's a great question.
Question.
We have had tremendous success in our, and I've seen this in other, not just trail or conservation group, these next gen committees. We in our area, the Fund for Lake George, the Lake George Land Conservancy. There's various organizations up in the Adirondacks that I've either worked with or involved with, and that's been really successful. Is identifying some younger individuals and setting up a next gen committee, and you give them. I don't mean this to belittle their efforts, but you give them a little rope where you give them some resources to meet, maybe the space, someone within the organization to help them with, organizing meetings. You might organize them with a mission, but you really let them help steer, give them some problem solving efforts that they can do. And it's honestly, a lot of the Bolton Hub piece has come from the younger members of the community and the organization, because a lot of the newer businesses, I mentioned the brewery, they're all pals. They're all talking to each other and hanging out with each other, and they want to be involved. And while you've heard this in the nonprofit, time, treasure, or talent. Maybe they don't have treasure at the young age, but heck, the time and talent, and if you can get them to volunteer. So at the Land Conservancy, it's about the races. So maybe not things that are directly linked to your mission of conserve land, but the Land Conservancy hosts a race in Amy's Park, and it's a wooded 5K run, and it's all sorts of fun. And they do this summer. The Next Gen does a summer solstice soiree. The Land Conservancy helps seed it with funding, and everyone gets to get dressed up, and and they love that. It's funny. I'm the old person there. I go there now, and they have me guest speak at it, and so it's pretty funny. But my gosh, they are the ones that want to help volunteer and be digging on the trail. They want to collaborate with businesses. There's an appetite in this generation for volunteerism, for networking. They need a lot of hand holding. So giving them the platform, finding some of those key people. So I think a Next Gen committee is really been beneficial that I've seen. And then the marketing aspect, it's funny. It's sort of an indirect result. If you are providing high quality outdoor recreational user experiences and you're marketing them, just the experiences themselves, the millennial and Gen Z generation is very much, they're not through hikers. I grew up when everyone wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, and Bill Bryson's book, and I was reading Krakauer, and Into Thin Air, and we were really into long-term outdoor mountaineering. Well, right now everyone wants to run up something and take an Instagram photo and then be down having a Bloody Mary for brunch afterwards. And so, if you're providing with them those opportunities to do just that, then you're attracting them, and then you have a captive audience on those trails to help tell your story. And that's what we're finding. We're finding an uptick in those small, $5, $10, $15 donations. And I'll tell you, it's impactful. It's made sort of the older, and I mean, not by age, but longer term members of our organization, and many of them with financial means, take notice that because it has been impactful. And so, I think providing the experience, having that online content, the signage, and the things I talked earlier about making our trails accessible and friendly, I think all those play into a younger user audience.
And when all else fails, brew a beer and name it after the trail.
Yeah. Yeah, beer. Sorry, let me sum it up. Beer. Craft beer.
Yeah.
Hey, we can't let that go without mentioning the cider too.
Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah. Well,
Insiders are we're a big fan of theirs, and they're a big fan of ours. Yeah.
Hey, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a good game for a good cider. Great question though.
Any last questions? Nothing coming up? I don't know if you need any do any housekeeping here before we power down, Alice or Jim?
Alice usually closes. Do you want to close us out, Alice?
Before you do, we just wanted to say thank you for inviting us. It's been a pleasure to spend an evening with you guys, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the trails.
Absolutely. Thank you, and happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. Happy
Thank you.
holidays.
Thank you, Paul.
Good seeing you. You guys can still call me Bose.
We'll call you. Thank